Emma Collins hated the night shift at Orbital Research Station Beta, the endless quiet broken only by the soft hum of life support systems made the massive archive feel like a tomb. But tonight was different. Tonight, she found something that would change everything. The storage unit B379 hadn't been opened in decades. Its exterior was covered in a fine layer of metallic dust that had slowly gathered over the years, despite the station's air filtration system. Emma's hand hesitated over the control panel. According to the records, this unit contained non-essential entertainment data from the mid-22nd century. She was only checking it as part of the station's 100-year review protocol. Might as well get it over with, she muttered to herself, pressing her palm against the scanner. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, rows of data crystals gleamed under the automatic lighting. Most were the standard blue-tinted variety used for storing old movies and shows. But one crystal caught her eye. It was red, the color used for incomplete or corrupted data. Emma picked up the crystal, turning it over in her hands. The label was faded, but she could just make out the text. Temporal echoes. Production footage. Final week. She froze. Everyone in the archive department knew about temporal echoes. It was supposed to be humanity's first zero-gravity horror film, but something had gone wrong during filming. The production had been shut down, and most of the footage was destroyed. Her hand shook slightly as she carried the crystal to her workstation. The main computer hummed to life as she inserted the crystal into the reader. The screen flickered, and then lines of text began to appear. Warning. Data QREPTION. DETCTED. Partial RECOVERI possible. QROCED. I/N. Emma's finger hovered over the keyboard. The smart thing would be to log the find and wait for her supervisor in the morning. But curiosity got the better of her. She pressed Y. The screen filled with static before resolving into an image that made her gasp. It showed a film set built inside a spacecraft, but something was wrong with the picture. The shadows didn't match the lighting. As she watched, equipment in the background moved on its own, floating past crew members who seemed not to notice. "That's not possible," Emma whispered. The footage was raw and unedited. These couldn't be special effects. A loud bang behind her made her jump. She spun around, but the archive room was empty. When she turned back to the screen, the footage had changed. Now it showed a man in an old-fashioned spacesuit, his face pale with fear. "Day 47 of production," he said, his voice shaking. "We're seeing things. Everyone's seeing things. The set, it's wrong. The walls aren't right anymore. Sometimes we turn around, and we're in scenes we haven't filmed yet. Thomas swears he saw himself yesterday, but he was on the other side of the ship when it happened. We need tow." The footage cut out, leaving Emma staring at her reflection in the dark screen. Her heart was racing. She reached for her communicator, then stopped. Who would she even call? What would she say? The lights in the archive flickered. Emma felt a chill run down her spine. She quickly saved a copy of the footage to her personal drive and ejected the crystal. As she held it, she noticed something odd. The crystal was warm to the touch, much warmer than it should be. Another bang echoed through the archive, closer this time. Emma spun around again, and for a split second, she thought she saw something. A shadow that didn't quite match the shelves it fell across. She backed away from her workstation, clutching the crystal tightly. "Hello," she called out. "Is anyone there?" The only answer was the hum of the life support system. But as she stood there in the quiet archive, Emma Collins knew two things for certain. First, she had just found the last surviving footage of the most infamous failed movie production in human history. And second, she was no longer alone in the archive. She needed help. She needed someone who could understand what she was seeing in that footage. She needed an expert in pre-contact entertainment. She needed Oliver Bennett. Oliver Bennett was not what Emma had expected. The famous xenorchaeologist turned out to be a short man with messy gray hair and reading glasses that kept sliding down his nose. He arrived at the station 12 hours after her urgent message, carrying nothing but an old leather bag full of outdated equipment. "Show me," were his first words to her. No hello, no introduction. Just those two words, spoken with an intensity that made Emma forget her carefully prepared speech about the footage. They walked through the quiet corridors of Beta Station together. It was the middle of the day shift, but Emma had cleared the archive room. She didn't want anyone else to see what she had found until she understood it better. "The crystal started getting warmer last night," Emma explained as they entered the archive. "I kept it in a cooling unit, but it's still warm." Oliver finished for her, reaching for the crystal storage unit. When he opened it, they both saw the frost that had formed around the red crystal. It was melting. Oliver picked up the crystal with a special glove. Fascinating. Energy output from a storage device that's been dormant for over 2 centuries. He placed it carefully into a scanner he'd brought. "Tell me exactly what you saw in the footage." Emma described the moving shadows, the equipment floating on its own, and the frightened crew member's testimony. Oliver listened without speaking, his eyes fixed on the scanner's readings. "Play it," he said finally. "I need to see it myself." Emma's hands shook slightly as she transferred the footage to the main screen. The same strange scenes played out. The wrong shadows, the floating equipment, the scared man in the spacesuit. But this time, she noticed something new. In the background of one shot, a figure walked past a mirror. The mirror showed no reflection. "Stop," Oliver shouted. "Go back 10 seconds." Emma rewound the footage. They watched the scene 3 more times. "Well," Oliver said, cleaning his glasses with shaking hands, "that's not supposed to happen." A loud crash made them both jump. One of the empty crystal storage containers had fallen off a shelf. As they watched, it rolled across the floor, moving against the station's artificial gravity. "That's really not supposed to happen," Oliver said quietly. He pulled an old device from his bag. It looked like a metal box with a dozen blinking lights. "This is a quantum field detector, old model, but reliable. And right now, it's showing readings that should be impossible inside a space station." "What kind of readings?" Emma asked, backing away from the rolling container. "The kind we usually only see near black holes or quantum communications arrays." Oliver frowned at the device. "The kind that suggests something is very wrong with space and time in this room." The lights flickered. In the brief moment of darkness, both of them heard footsteps, many footsteps, like a film crew walking around the room. But when the lights came back on, they were still alone. "The original movie," Oliver said, his voice steady despite his pale face, "was trying to tell the story of a space crew who found a way to travel through time. The script called for them to build a prop quantum drive." He looked at Emma. "What if they accidentally built something that worked?" "That's impossible," Emma protested. "They were just making a movie. It was all pretend." "Maybe not." Oliver held up his quantum field detector. Its lights were all flashing red now. The prop department used salvaged parts from a real quantum communications array. They thought they were just making something that looked impressive on camera. But if they accidentally got the configuration right, the temperature in the room dropped suddenly. Their breath came out as steam in the cold air. On the screen behind them, the footage was still playing, but now it showed something new. A scene they hadn't seen before. In it, 2 people stood in an archive room, watching old footage on a screen. One of them looked exactly like Emma. The other looked exactly like Oliver. "I think," Oliver said slowly, "we need to call in an expert on quantum physics, and we need to do it quickly, before." The lights went out again. This time, they stayed out. Lucy Hayes had been the station's AI specialist for 5 years, but she had never seen anything like this. The backup generators had kicked in after 30 seconds of darkness, but the main computer was acting strangely. Numbers flickered across her screen faster than human eyes could follow. The system is trying to process something, she told Emma and Oliver, her fingers flying over the keyboard. It's like it's having a conversation, but not with us. They had moved to the main control room after the incident in the archive. The red crystal sat in a containment unit nearby, still radiating heat despite the cooling systems working at full power. "Look at this," Lucy said, pointing to her screen. "Every time we try to play the footage, the computer records data in places we're not using. It's creating new files on its own." Oliver leaned closer to the screen, adjusting his glasses. "Can you show us these new files?" Lucy nodded and opened one. The screen filled with what looked like a movie script, but the words made no sense. They kept changing, rearranging themselves into different patterns. "Wait," Emma said suddenly. "Go back. There was something there about Thomas Wright." Lucy scrolled back through the changing text. There it was, a diary entry dated from the original filming. Day 52. I saw myself today. Not in a mirror. I was walking down the corridor to film scene 47. And there I was, at the other end, filming scene 93. But we haven't shot scene 93 yet. The other me looked right at me. He tried to say something. They tell me I'm just tired, that I'm imagining things. But I know what I saw. There's something here with us, something that's learning from us. It's watching our stories, trying to understand what we're doing. God help me, I think it's trying to join in. The room went quiet after Lucy finished reading. The only sound was the hum of the computers and the soft beeping of Oliver's quantum field detector. They weren't going mad, Oliver said softly. They actually made contact with something. But not aliens like we usually think of them. Emma walked over to the containment unit holding the crystal. "What do you mean?" "Think about it," Oliver said, getting excited. "What is a story? It's us imagining different possibilities, different worlds. When they built that prop quantum drive using real parts, they accidentally created a window into those possibilities. They reached into other dimensions." Lucy's computer beeped loudly. New words were appearing on the screen. Understand now. Story making. Want to learn. Emma felt her heart skip a beat. Is that? Are we talking to them? Right now. Lucy's fingers moved across the keyboard again. The universal translator is running. But it's not translating from any known language. It's learning English as we watch. HFY Story stories appeared on the screen. Oliver pulled out his notebook. All these years, we thought Temporal Echoes was a failed horror movie. But it wasn't. It was First Contact. These beings, whatever they are, were drawn to human creativity. They still are. The lights flickered again, but this time it felt different. Not threatening, but more like someone trying to get their attention. "Help me understand his stories," the screen showed. Emma looked at the others. They're not haunting us. They're trying to learn from us. All those strange things in the footage, they were attempts to copy what they saw in the movie scenes. Lucy nodded slowly. The moving equipment, the weird shadows, they were trying to make their own special effects. They were trying to make movies like we do. The crystal in the containment unit began to glow with a soft red light. On every screen in the room, the same message appeared. TEGUS stories. Killies. Oliver smiled. "Well," he said, "I don't think we need to call that quantum physicist yet, but we might want to call in a film teacher." None of them noticed that the security cameras had caught it all. None of them saw Harold Pierce, the security chief, watching the footage with growing concern. And none of them knew that he had already sent a message to his real employers who had been searching for proof of dimensional contact for a very long time. James Fletcher was good at finding patterns. As a research assistant, it was his job to notice the small details others missed. Right now, those details were telling him something important about the Temporal Echoes footage. "Look here," he said, pointing to his tablet. Emma, Oliver, and Lucy gathered around his workstation in the main control room. Every strange event in the original filming happened during scenes with the quantum drive prop. He played a series of clips side by side. In each one, the strange shadows and moving objects appeared only when the large, ring-shaped prop was in view. That's not all, James continued, swiping to a new screen. I found the original prop department logs. The quantum drive wasn't just made from random salvaged parts. They used pieces from the Hawking array. Oliver's face went pale. The Hawking array? Are you sure? Emma looked between them. What's the Hawking array? It was humanity's first attempt at quantum communication, Lucy explained, her eyes wide. It failed catastrophically. The whole project was shut down after test signals started coming back from times and places that didn't exist. James nodded. The movie studio bought the scrapped parts cheap. They thought they were just getting interesting-looking junk for their prop department. He pulled up an old technical diagram. But look at how they put it together. The diagram showed the ring-shaped prop. Inside it, the salvaged parts formed a pattern that made Oliver gasp. That's impossible, he whispered. They accidentally built a working quantum resonance chamber. The exact design we discovered 50 years later. The screens around them flickered. New words appeared. Yes. Bridge built. Excident. Happy excident. Lucy's fingers moved across her keyboard. They're getting better at communicating. The AI is learning their language patterns faster now. HFY Sci-Fi appeared on the screen. The main display filled with new footage, not from the original movie, but from somewhere else. It showed a vast space filled with shifting colors and geometric shapes. Strange, floating creatures moved through the space, their bodies changing shape as they swam through the air. Their dimension, Oliver breathed. They're showing us their home. James pointed to something in the background. Look, those patterns. They're trying to copy our movie sets. They're building their own. The image changed again, showing the creatures attempting to arrange themselves into human-like shapes, trying to act out scenes like they'd seen in the movie footage. Learn stories. Make stories. Like humans do. Emma smiled. They're not just learning our language, they're learning our art. A loud bang made them all jump. The door to the control room slid open. Harold Pierce stood there with 2 armed security officers. That's quite enough learning for today, he said coldly. This facility is now under lockdown by order of the Dimensional Research Agency. The what? Emma started to ask, but Oliver grabbed her arm. The DRA, he said quietly. The government's secret research team. They've been trying to prove the existence of other dimensions for decades. Harold smiled without warmth. And thanks to all of you, we finally have our proof. Step away from the computers. All of this data is now classified. You can't do this, Lucy protested. They're trying to communicate with us, to learn from us. Exactly, Harold said. Imagine what we could learn from them. Their technology, their capabilities. He turned to the security officers. Secure the crystal and all research data. But as the officers moved forward, every screen in the room lit up with the same message. No, not for taking. For sharing. The lights went out. When they came back on 3 seconds later, the crystal was gone. So was all the footage. Every screen showed the same final message. We'll return and wait in ready. When as AFE. Thank you for stories. Harold's face turned red with anger. But there was nothing he could do. Their dimensional visitors had made their choice. They would share their knowledge when they wanted to, not when they were forced. James looked at his tablet and smiled. In his personal files, 1 small video clip remained, a piece of footage showing the creatures in their own dimension, learning to tell stories of their own. Dr. Margaret Winters arrived at Beta Station 3 days after the crystal disappeared. The quantum physicist had been studying dimensional theory for 20 years, but even she wasn't prepared for what she found in James's remaining video clip. This changes everything, she said, watching the footage for the 10th time. The team had gathered in Emma's quarters, away from the DRA's prying eyes. Harold and his men were still searching the station, growing more frustrated by the hour. "Look at how they move," Margaret pointed at the screen. The beings in the video flowed like water, their shapes constantly changing. "They don't just live in another dimension. They are another dimension, a living, thinking piece of space-time." Oliver leaned forward. "What do you mean?" Margaret pulled out a paper and pen, drawing as she explained. "Our universe has rules, solid things, fixed shapes, time that moves in one direction. But their dimension," she drew a series of flowing lines. "Everything there is fluid. Past, present, future, all happening at once. That's why they were so interested in our stories," Lucy said suddenly. "Because we can only imagine different times and places, but they can actually see them." "Exactly." Margaret's eyes lit up. "But they couldn't understand why we would make up stories when we could only live in one moment at a time." It fascinated them. When that prop quantum drive accidentally opened a window between our dimensions, they found something entirely new. Emma thought about the original movie footage. So when the film crew saw themselves in scenes they hadn't shot yet, they were seeing the dimensional beings trying to copy them. James finished. "The beings were watching our stories and trying to act them out, but they didn't understand that we can only be in one place at one time." A soft beeping came from Oliver's quantum field detector. The lights in Emma's quarters flickered once. "They're still here," Margaret whispered. "They never left the station. They're just watching, learning." The computer screen on Emma's desk came to life. Words appeared. "Understand better now. Stories are human magic. Make one moment, many moments." Lucy moved to her laptop. The translation program is still working. They've learned even more of our language. One and two HFY our magic too. But some humans want take, not share. "The DRA," Oliver growled. "They'll try to weaponize this contact. Turn it into some kind of dimensional technology." The screen flickered again. "No weapons. Only stories. Show you true seeing." The air in the room seemed to ripple. Suddenly, they could all see it. Layers upon layers of reality, stacked like pages in a book. In one layer, they were having this same conversation, but with different words. In another, they hadn't discovered the crystal at all. In yet another, they were celebrating their discovery with people from all over Earth. "My God," Margaret breathed. "They're showing us how they see reality. Every possibility exists at once." "No undi or a stand," the screen asked. "All stories true somewhere. Humans special. Humans guess right stories without seeing. Humans imagine true things." The vision faded, leaving them all blinking in the normal light of Emma's quarters. But something had changed. They all felt it. "That's why the beings came back to us again and again," Margaret said softly. "We're the only species they found who can imagine other realities without actually seeing them. Our creativity, our ability to tell stories, it's like a superpower to them." A new message appeared. "Want learn make stories human way. Want teach humans see the ways. But only if share, not take. Only if safe." Emma stood up. "Then we'll make it safe. The DRA isn't the only government agency. We can go public, share this with everyone. Make it too big to hide." The others nodded. Even Margaret, who had worked with the government for years, agreed. This was too important to keep secret. The screen showed one final message. "Yes, time tell story together. Time make an EU magic." The plan to go public would have to wait. As Emma and her team left her quarters, they found Beta Station had changed. The familiar corridors now seemed to bend in impossible ways. Doorways sometimes led to different rooms than they should. Time itself felt strange. with digital clocks showing different hours depending on who looked at them. The dimensional beings, Margaret explained as they walked carefully through the twisting hallways. They're trying to protect us from the DRA, but they don't quite understand how our reality works. Harold Pierce's voice echoed through the station speakers. Attention all personnel. This is a code black security alert. Return to your quarters immediately. He sounded angry and scared at the same time. James checked his tablet. The DRA's brought in reinforcements. 3 ships just docked at the North Hub. We need to reach the main control room, Lucy said. I can broadcast everything we know from there. Once it's public, the DRA can't hide it. Oliver's quantum field detector was beeping constantly now. The dimensional activity is getting stronger. Look. They all stopped. Ahead of them, the corridor split into 3 different versions of itself. In one version, they could see themselves already at the control room. In another, they were still in Emma's quarters. In the third, they were somewhere else entirely. Which one is real? Emma asked. They all are, Margaret answered. The beings are showing us all possible paths. We have to choose which one to make real. Choose story appeared on James's tablet. Make ending. Lucy pointed to the first path. That one. If we can see ourselves already at the control room, that means we can make it there. They stepped forward together. Reality seemed to blur around them, and suddenly they were in the control room. But they weren't alone. Harold stood there with 6 DRA agents, all armed. I have to admit, I'm impressed, he said. You've given these beings quite an education in human behavior, especially deception. He pointed to the main computer. Now help us communicate with them. That's an order. You don't understand what you're dealing with. Margaret stepped forward. These beings don't think like us. They don't understand possession or control. They only understand sharing. Then they'll learn, Harold smiled coldly. Everyone learns when they have no choice. The lights in the control room began to flicker rapidly. On every screen, words appeared and disappeared faster than human eyes could follow. The air itself seemed to vibrate. What's happening? One of the DRA agents asked, his voice shaking. They're trying to tell us something, Lucy said, her fingers flying over the nearest keyboard. But they're excited or scared. The translation program can't keep up. Suddenly, every screen went black. Then, one by one, they lit up again. But now they showed scenes from Temporal Echoes, the original movie that had started everything. Except the scenes were different. Those aren't the original actors, Oliver whispered. Look closer. Emma gasped. The beings had recreated every scene from the movie, but with themselves playing all the parts. They moved like flowing mercury, shifting between human shapes and their natural forms. It was beautiful and strange at the same time. Don't you see? Margaret turned to Harold. They don't want to be weapons or tools. They'd want to be artists, storytellers, like us. Before Harold could answer, the air rippled again. This time, the entire control room seemed to split into multiple versions of itself. In each version, they could see different possible endings playing out. Choose, the screen showed. All stories possible. Which BC mini is real? Emma looked at her friends, then at Harold and his agents. She understood now. The beings weren't just showing them possibilities. They were letting them write the ending together. All of them, even their enemies. The question was, which story would they choose to make real? Harold Pierce lowered his weapon first. Perhaps it was the beauty of the dimensional beings' movie scenes playing on the screens, or maybe it was the way reality itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for their choice. Whatever the reason, something had changed in his eyes. Stand down, he ordered his agents. They looked uncertain but followed his command. Look at this, he said, walking to the nearest screen. Really look at it. We thought we could capture their power, use it as a weapon. But we were trying to turn art into a gun. The dimensional beings version of temporal echoes continued playing. Their flowing, mercury-like bodies shifted between shapes, telling the story with a grace that no human actor could match. Un dier stand de no appeared on the main screen. Stories more powerful than weapons. Lucy stepped forward. They're right. Think about it. Stories have changed human history more than any weapon. They've started revolutions, built empires, and brought down governments. Not through force, but through ideas. Margaret nodded. These beings can see every possible reality at once, but they were fascinated by us because we can imagine possibilities without seeing them. We create new realities just by telling stories about them. The air rippled again, and suddenly they were surrounded by scenes from human history. But not the battles or wars. They saw people gathered around fires telling tales, children reading books, families watching movies together, audiences in theaters crying and laughing. Humans make magic. The screens showed change worlds with words. James checked his tablet. The quantum field readings are off the charts. They're putting on a show for us, showing us how they see human creativity. Emma watched as the scenes shifted to show the dimensional beings in their own realm. They were sharing the stories they'd learned from humans with others of their kind. More and more beings gathered, changing shape to act out the tales. They're building their own entertainment industry, Oliver said with a smile, learning to tell stories their way. Harold walked to the main computer terminal. With steady hands, he began typing. Everyone watched as he composed a message. To DRA Central Command. Subject: Beta Station Investigation. Status: No evidence of viable dimensional weapons technology found. Recommend project termination. Full report to follow. He turned to face the others. The DRA will accept that. They won't waste resources chasing a dead end. He managed a small smile. Besides, who would believe the truth? The screens flickered with a new message. Truth is story too. Beast story. Share. Emma understood. They want to know if we'll help them share this with humanity. Not as a weapon or a tool, but as art. As a way to connect. Lucy was already working at her terminal. We can start small. Release some of the footage as a documentary about the making of temporal echoes. Let people see the beauty of it first. A lot of people will think it's just special effects, James added. But some will understand. The ones who need to. The dimensional beings seemed to approve. The scenes around them shifted to show possible futures. Humans and dimensional beings creating art together, sharing stories across the boundaries of space and time. Not end of story, the screens displayed. Beginning. Margaret turned to Harold. Will you help? Your position at the DRA could make this easier. Help us share this the right way. Harold looked at the scenes of cooperation and creativity playing out around them. He thought about the weapon he'd hoped to create and the art he'd found instead. Yes, he said finally. I think it's time for a new story. The being's response filled every screen in flowing, elegant letters. Now tell story together. All versions, all possibilities, make new magic. As the words faded, they all knew that something unprecedented was about to begin. The greatest collaboration in human history, art that crossed the boundaries between dimensions. John walked down the street. He looked at the houses. They were all different colors. Some were big and some were small. He saw a black cat in one of the yards. It was sitting in the sun. John kept walking. Soon he came to the park. There were lots of trees. He could hear birds singing. Some kids were playing on the swings. They looked like they were having fun. John wished he could play too. But John was on a mission. He needed to find his friend Sarah. She had something important to tell him. He didn't know what it was, but he knew he had to find her. John left the park. He turned onto Sarah's street. Her house was at the end. It was painted white. John walked up to her door. He knocked loudly. After a minute, the door opened. Sarah stood there and smiled. "Hey, John," she said. "I'm so glad you came. Come inside. I have to show you something really cool." John went into the house. He wondered what Sarah wanted to show him. He was excited to find out. Sarah always had the best surprises. This part of the story sets up some intrigue about what Sarah wants to show John. It uses simple vocabulary and sentence structure to convey the scene and John's thoughts in a straightforward way. The mention of the mission and something important Sarah has to show adds an element of anticipation to keep the reader interested in finding out what happens next. Let me know if you would like me to continue with part 9 of the story.